The Bell Witch Haunting, the Demon of Tennessee. The night was heavy and quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound echo twice as loud. Inside the Bell family farmhouse in Adams, Tennessee, John Bell sat in his chair at the wooden table. His breathing was shallow, his face pale. Suddenly, his body stiffened, and his hand knocked over a cup of water. His children rushed to his side, but before they could help, a harsh voice, low and cruel, filled the room. It called his name. "John!" The sound did not come from any human mouth. It came from the very walls of the house. The family watched in horror as John's lips turned blue, his body trembling as if something unseen was choking him. "Papa!" one of the children screamed, but no one could stop what was happening. The air itself seemed to come alive, thick and pressing, as if the house was breathing with them, against them. Then, just as sudden as it began, John collapsed in the chair, gasping for air. On the floor by his feet lay a small vial of liquid. It smelled sharp, almost like poison. The voice laughed, a deep mocking laugh that rolled through the farmhouse, and then it was gone. But how did it all begin? The horror had not started that night. It began years earlier, in 1817, with the smallest of sounds. The Bells first noticed scratching on the walls of their log cabin at night. At first, they thought it was a mouse or a raccoon clawing at the wood. They set traps, patched holes, but nothing stopped the noise. Then the scratching grew louder, joined by knocking that came from the floorboards and doors. When they went outside to check, no one was there. Soon, the chains came. The family would lie awake and hear heavy chains dragging across the floor. Though no chains existed in the house, neighbors began to whisper. Word spread across the small town that strange things were happening at the Bell place. Some Tijus thought it was just stories, but others had already felt a chill when they passed the farm. At first, the Bells tried to ignore it. Life in Tennessee was hard enough without chasing ghosts. But the unseen force grew bold. Whispers began to float through the rooms, calling out their names in the dark. Sometimes, the voice sounded like a woman crying. Other times, it laughed cruelly, like someone mocking them. The children grew terrified, refusing to sleep alone. John's wife, Lucy, prayed every night for protection, her voice shaking as she clutched her Bible. Then the spirit revealed itself in a new way. It began to attack. The children, especially young Betsy Bell, would wake screaming, red marks on her arms as if someone had slapped her. At supper, food would be pulled from their plates and thrown to the ground. When John knelt to pray, a heavy pressure pushed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. The family no longer felt safe in their own home. As months passed, the haunting only grew stronger. Neighbors were invited to witness the events, and many left pale-faced, unable to explain what they had seen. Some swore they heard the voice speak clearly, mocking prayers, or quoting scripture with a twisted tone. Ministers came to bless the house, but the spirit only laughed and grew louder, as if daring them to try and stop it. By 1818, the Bell family was at their breaking point. Betsy, now a teenager, suffered the most. She complained of an invisible hand pulling at her hair, scratching her face until it bled. One night, while she was trying to sleep, her bed began to shake violently. Her brothers rushed in, but they could do nothing to stop it. The bedposts rattled, the blankets flew across the room, and Betsy screamed as something unseen slapped her again and again. The family stood in shock, watching their sister being beaten by a force they could not to. Ugh! The house groaned as if alive, and the voice returned, laughing, taunting, filling every corner with its presence. It was no longer just a haunting, it was war. And that night, as Betsy's cries echoed through the farmhouse, the Bell Witch revealed just how far it was willing to go. Betsy's screams pierced the farmhouse that night, and the family huddled together, powerless to protect her. Her bed thrashed like it was caught in a storm, though no wind blew. She clutched her blanket tight, her knuckles white, while red welts rose across her cheeks. John Bell shouted, "Leave her be!" But the only answer was the cruel laugh of the unseen force. Then, as quickly as it had started, the bed fell still. Betsy lay trembling, tears streaking her face, whispering, "It won't leave me alone." The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Everyone knew it would return. The following days were filled with dread. Betsy could not go to school without feeling her hair pulled by invisible fingers. Her friends noticed her fear, and rumors spread through town. Some said the Bells were cursed. Others whispered that Betsy had brought something evil into the house. John and Lucy tried to comfort her, but Every night brought new torment. Sometimes Betsy would feel icy hands grip her neck. Other times she would hear a whisper right in her ear, mocking her prayers. The townspeople began to visit the Bell farmhouse, curious and terrified at the same time. One evening, a minister arrived to pray over the family. The moment he opened his Bible, the voice rang out, mocking him. "Preacher," it said, "you can't save them." His hands shook as he tried to continue, but the words were drowned by loud knocks that shook the walls. Chairs slid across the floor, and the fire in the hearth roared higher as if fed by unseen breath. The minister left pale and shaken, warning the family that this was no ordinary spirit. Lucy Bell, strong in her faith, began to notice something strange. Unlike her husband and children, she was never harmed. The voice, though cruel to the others, spoke to her with an odd respect. Some nights, while everyone else trembled, the spirit would whisper to Lucy in a softer tone, almost kind. "Sweet Lucy," it said, "you are safe." This both comforted and terrified her, for she could not understand why the demon would spare her. John, however, was not spared. He began to suffer more than anyone. At times, while working on the farm, he felt hands shove him to the ground. His face would swell as if he had been struck. On one terrible morning, he awoke to find his tongue swollen, making it nearly impossible to speak. His children watched in fear as he struggled for words, while the mocking voice filled the air, laughing, "John Bell will not speak again." Despite the terror, life in Adams went on. Neighbors brought food, but many refused to stay long, afraid of what they might hear. Some claimed that while walking past the Bell farm at night, they saw lights flicker in the windows, or shadows moving where no one stood. The whole town now knew the name, the Bell Witch. The haunting reached another terrible peak when Betsy became engaged to a young man named Joshua Gardner. The spirit reacted with rage. "You will never marry him," it screamed one night, shaking the walls so hard that dishes fell from the shelves. Betsy tried to ignore it, but each time she met Joshua, the torment grew worse. Her hair would be yanked, her face slapped, and once she collapsed in the dirt, choking on unseen hands. Joshua, horrified, began to doubt whether their love could survive such evil. The Bells begged the spirit to stop, but it only grew more violent. Betsy's laughter at Joshua's jokes would be drowned out by growls in the air. When she walked in the fields, the sound of heavy footsteps followed her, though no one was there. Neighbors swore they saw her faint, then rise as if pulled up by invisible arms. It seemed the demon was determined to destroy her happiness. One stormy night, as thunder shook the skies, the voice returned louder than ever. "Betsy belongs to me!" it shrieked. The farmhouse shook, windows rattled, and a dark shadow swept across the room like a black cloud. Betsy collapsed to the floor, clawing at her throat, gasping for air as though the life was being drained from her. And in that moment, the family realized the witch was no longer satisfied with torment. It wanted to claim someone for itself. Betsy lay on the floor, clawing at her throat, her eyes wide with terror, while the voice screamed, "Betsy belongs to me!" John and Lucy dropped to their knees beside her. John tried to lift her, but his arms shook as if an invisible weight pressed down on them all. Then, like a storm ending in one sharp crack, the pressure snapped away. Betsy coughed, air rushing back into her lungs. The house went still, too still. The silence felt like the pause before lightning hits. The next morning, the Bells sent for help. Neighbors came with worried faces and shaky hands, bringing food and prayers. A minister returned with 2 elders from his church. They walked through each room, reading scripture aloud. The words sounded strong, but the answers were cruel. From the rafters, the voice mocked every verse, repeating them back in a twisted tone. "You don't scare me," it hissed. "This house is mine." One elder dropped his Bible when a chair slid across the room by itself and slammed into the wall. Days stretched into weeks. Betsy tried to see Joshua in town, but each meeting ended in fear. If they held hands, a sharp slap cracked the air and left a red mark on Betsy's wrist. If they spoke of marriage, dishes shattered in the Bell kitchen, though no one touched them. Finally, with tears in her eyes, Betsy broke the engagement. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Joshua stepped back, helpless. The spirit was stronger than their plans. That night, the voice purred in the dark, "Wise choice." But the witch's anger did not fade. It turned on John Bell with a new hunger. He woke with his tongue swollen, words cruse, heed to grunts. His hands shook while he tried to eat. Sometimes he fell in the field, as if tripped by a foot he could not see. Once, as neighbors watched, his hat flew from his head and rolled uphill against the wind. The voice laughed, deep and slow. "John Bell," it said, "your time is short." Lucy kept close to her husband, praying softly. The spirit never hurt her. Some nights it even murmured, "Sweet Lucy," from the corner of the room, as if she were a guest of honor at a cruel show. She hated that kindness more than the blows. "Leave my family," she said, steady and low. "Take me instead." The answer slithered back, "No." As winter neared, John grew weak. His oldest son searched the house for signs of tricks, loose boards, hidden wires, any human hand behind the madness. They found nothing. Nothing but a small glass vial buried under a blanket in a wooden chest. When they uncorked it, a bitter, sharp smell filled the room. A neighbor held it up, frowning. "This could kill a man," he said. From the air above them, the voice rang out, bright with victory. "I gave old Jack a big dose last night." The room seemed to shrink. Everyone stared at John, pale in his chair, fighting for breath. They sent for the doctor. They watched John's chest rise and fall, then slow. Lucy held his hand and sang a hymn through tears. The witch hummed along, note for note. By morning, John Bell was gone. Word spread across Adams like fire in dry grass. People came from miles away to stand in the yard. Some wept. Some stared at the house as if it were a mouth that had just swallowed a man. At the funeral, when the minister began to speak, the witch joined in with a mocking sermon, loud and sharp, drowning the living with laughter. The coffin lowered. The wind held its breath. "He is mine," the voice said, soft as a secret. After John's burial, the house settled into a strange quiet. A scratching stopped. The chains stilled. Betsy slept through the night for the first time in months. Lucy set the table without fear of plates flying. People dared to hope that it was over. Then, late one evening, as the sun bled into the fields, the voice returned, calm, cold, certain. "I will come back," it promised. 7 years, remember me. 7 years later, just as the clock in the hall struck the hour, a whisper curled through the dark like smoke, and the floorboards sighed under invisible feet. The Bell farm held its breath again.